Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Say You'll See Me in Court. Yes, you will, because I'm taking you first. A couple of years ago, I was in an apartment with my friend and younger sister. My sister was violent towards my friend and I ended up having to get a restraining order against her. She brought in a dog without permission, which caused some damage to the unit. I informed my landlord of the incidences of violence and the damage and sent him pictures. He basically told me to deal with it myself, which I did by getting the protective order. After this, my roommate questioned the legality of holding us responsible for her portion of rent. I told her it was, but she asked our landlord for a copy of the lease to show her uncle anyway, which admittedly was pretty stupid. Up until this point, our landlord had not asked us to leave due to my sister's actions, but he did after the lease was brought into it. We were out by the date he specified on the notice to quit, the first step in the eviction process before the eviction actually occurs. My roommate was there until midnight making sure the place was spotless. We moved to an apartment across the street. 2 weeks had passed since he was informed that we had vacated the unit, and we had not gotten anything regarding our security deposit. In our state, a landlord is required by law to either return the remainder of a security deposit within 2 weeks or provide a letter itemizing what the deposit was used for. If they don't, the tenant is owed the entire deposit. If the withholding is willful, the tenant is owed double the original deposit. The landlord had actually told me that he would be going on vacation immediately after we vacated, so I returned our keys to him and waited to see if he would send anything. He never did. After consulting with a tenants' rights group to be sure I was in the right, I sent a pre-formatted letter 16 days after we vacated, which stated the specific laws regarding security deposits and gave him our current address to send either the deposit or receipt to. The day after I sent this letter, I see him across the street, frantically running into the apartment for the first time since we moved out. I receive a text from him saying that he would return what's left of our deposit if he could get the apartment rented by the 1st of next month. I respond by telling him that, as the letter I sent explained, he forfeits the right to keep any of the deposit after the 2 weeks is up. He responded saying that he would see us in court and that we were nightmare tenants and that this will be fun. He said he would also be taking us to court for the costs to relist and rent the apartment, which he claimed exceeded the amount of our deposit. After about a month or two of hearing nothing back, we decided to say duck it and file a small claims suit against him, as he clearly wasn't going to follow through on his threats. As the person who had almost all communication with him, I was the plaintiff in the case. He brought a letter that was dated for the day he texted me, where he arbitrarily wrote in what he used the deposit on and claimed he sent us the letter. That obviously didn't add up, which I thoroughly explained to the judge, as he had texted me that day saying that we would get some of the deposit returned and that he had no proof that he actually sent that letter. He clearly just wrote it and printed it out for the court hearing. During the court hearing, he also said a lot of false and victim-blaming crap, such as implying that I participated in the violence that occurred, saying we caused damages that were definitely there when we moved in, and just attacking my character in general. The judge ruled that the withholding of the security deposit was willful and awarded us double the deposit. But of course, that wasn't the end of it, and a few days before his deadline to pay us the money, he sends me a text just letting me know that the decision has been appealed. I didn't answer and showed up to court again, and lo and behold, it's more mudslinging and arguing about things that we already established in the first hearing. The judge upheld the original decision, and he eventually mailed me the check for double the deposit. In the memo line on the check where you can write the reason for the payment, he wrote, for gaining £20. But hey, I cashed that check and spent my half on a new gaming laptop, so I'd say I got the last laugh. I desperately wanted to text him and ask him if it was as fun as he thought it would be, but resisted the urge. Also, apparently I didn't make this clear enough, but yes, violence occurred towards me as well. I could do without the victim blaming. And the dog that she brought in without permission that chewed a tiny chunk off of the windowsill. In court, the falsified deposit receipt letter was mostly comprised of cleaning fees and damages that were there when we moved in. Next one is titled, Tell Me to Quit Since I Can't Be Manager. By then. So, when I was freshly out of high school, I hadn't decided on what I wanted to do with my life, so I got a job at a pizza place near where I lived. I've always been the type of person who would rather work than sit at home, and I don't have a ton of friends to hang out with. They started out having me just making the food deliveries once or twice a week, but that quickly turned into them calling me in daily about an hour after they opened because the owners didn't want to make the deliveries, and they were the only ones working the front of the house. Like I mentioned previously, I didn't mind coming into work and would always say that it wasn't a problem. About 2 weeks into my working at the pizza shop, the owners insisted that I learn register because they were no longer willing to do it themselves during the week. Okay, sure, no problem, it's just more money for me. They continued training me in every aspect of running the physical business over the next month. Every once in a while, the owners would say they want to make me a manager, so they can leave whenever they want. Great, I thought. As time went on, I would work anywhere between 60 to 80 hours per week because other employees would call out or not show, and the owners didn't want to stick around to deal with it. They even trusted me to hire a server and a delivery driver, cashier. About 8 months into working there, running myself ragged for them and never getting so much as a thank you for everything I did for them, I decided to sit down with one of the owners and express the way I felt to them. Me, hey, boss one, I know you keep saying you want to make me a manager. Is there any reason you haven't yet? Boss one, just haven't found the time or reason to train you for it yet. Me, what do you mean? I already know how to do everything from taking orders to ordering supplies when we're running low on something. Boss one, yes, but it's not your place to do all those things yet. Me, what do you mean? Boss one, you're not a manager, you should not be doing manager tasks. Alright, that's how you want to play it? Then consider it done. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't do anything aside from what they hired me to do, make deliveries and only work on my scheduled days. This went on for about 2 days and really upset the owners because now at least one of them had to be there at all times to make sure everything else was getting done. Eventually, Boss 1 called me into his back office to talk. Boss 1, what has gotten into you? Me, what do you mean? Boss 1, you know you need to put in orders for supplies, yet we're running out of flour and out of soda syrup, and no orders have been placed. Me, I'm sorry, Boss 1, but you told me that I'm not a manager, and I shouldn't be acting like one, so I stopped. Boss 1, stop being a child, You know your responsibilities here, and you need to do your job. Me, I am doing my job and only my job. If you want to make me a manager, I'll be happy to do those things. Boss 1, you really think I'm going to make you a manager after this? Me, if I'm not a manager, then I won't do a manager's job. Boss 1, fine, then just quit. You need to get over yourself. Me, okay, I quit. As of right now, I'm done. Boss 1, fine. So, I left. I was scheduled to work all week, which meant that they were out of basically a manager. I ended up getting a call the following afternoon from Boss 1 demanding to know why I was so late for work, but I just reminded him that I no longer work there. Now, I was and still am very close friends with some old co-workers and heard all the drama as it unfolded. Turns out, most of the employees ended up refusing to work because the owners had to be there full-time now, and they were awful. In my time working there, I hired about 5 people, and all 5 left because I wasn't there to play manager anymore. They ended up closing about 6 months after I left because they couldn't get anyone to stay longer than about 2 weeks. Next one is titled, How I Achieved Malicious Compliance with T. Hey all, I thought I would share one of my favorite stories of following someone's request and making them rethink their words. The main players are me, my younger brother and the teacher we will call Mr. Shane. This happened in high school in my senior year and is my favorite story of being a smartass. We had this teacher we will call Mr. Shane. He was an older, very strict teacher who came to my rural Midwest town from inner city Chicago, so he thought he could handle just about anything a student threw at him. No one liked Mr. Shane. He was rude, loud, and for him if you didn't do what he said it was a one-way ticket to the office. Even the principal got tired of him sometimes. I was a quiet, nerdy, metalhead teenager who was on track to graduate early and earn a couple awards from the district. I put forth effort to get along with everyone. My younger brother hated Mr. Shane for many reasons, like reading mine and his IEPs, very confidential stuff normally, in front of the class and managed to get away with it. Needless to say, Mr. Shane was incredibly unpopular. I used to bring a can of Arizona tea with me to school because it's dirt cheap and actually pretty tasty. If you've had it, you will understand how good it can be. Shane had a problem with this because I'm pretty sure if he wasn't asserting his dominance, he thought he wasn't doing his job. I didn't distract people with the tea, but he was fed up with me and my brother calling him out on his stuff, so one day he told me not to bring any more because I didn't bring enough for everyone else. Challenge accepted. The very next day I stopped at the grocery store on my way to school and picked up 2 gallons of Arizona green tea, along with red Solo cups. I let slip to one of my best friends that's also in the class, and he could barely contain his excitement. When time for class came, Mr. Shane walked in and looked smug, up until he saw me giving my classmates Arizona green tea. I even offered him a glass and he exploded in anger and sent me to the office, before confiscating all my tea and cups. When I told the secretaries, they laughed and sent me in to talk to the vice principal. The vice principal was incredibly amused by my story, and a few minutes later my brother came into the office as well, with the gallons of tea and cups. Apparently Mr. Shane lost it and was ranting to himself the rest of the school day over disrespectful students. He stopped teaching after that school year, and I like to think I had a hand in that. Next one is titled, "Want Me to Ruin a Batch of Wine? Be My Guest." This story took place in September 2020 in a small winery here in Italy. I had wonderful co-workers, but the manager, as you might expect, wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. We had a new to-do list every day, which we made ourselves, to keep track of what needed to be done, e.g. wine sugar levels, yeast activity, temperatures, VATs that needed to be cleaned, and so on. I was in charge of the machinery that squashed the grapes into must and of the yeast mixing. I had just finished transferring a truckload of red grapes into a now full vat, which means that after the sugar level is measured, yeast needs to be added. I went on to take the bags so I could start mixing it, but noticed that the yeast that we used for red wine was almost over, so off to talk to the manager I went. After I explained the problem, he just very dismissively told me to just mix in some white wine yeast. Now this is a very big no-no in this field, as the two kinds operate in very different conditions. I tried to make him come to his senses, but he wasn't having none of it, so I just did what I was told to do. After a couple of days we noticed that the sugar level of that vat wasn't going down anymore, which means that the fermentation had stopped. This is equivalent to a code red. We did everything we could, even adding another type of yeast that is specifically made for emergencies, but at that point it was too late. Now instead of wine we had a vat of basically soon-to-be vinegar. The manager was not happy about it, and the owner of the company basically told him to duck off as soon as the harvesting season was over. I still got to keep the job though, because my co-workers vouched for me and because that wasn't the first time the now ex-manager screwed up badly. Honestly, I'm just really sorry for all that wasted wine. Next one is titled, "Malicious School Compliance." I went to a high school where our general studies main building was divided up into 5 different units. There was the red, the green, yellow, and the azure, blue buildings. In the middle was the science building. Anyway, each student was assigned to a colored building. And this is where your homeroom was. Wherever your homeroom is, that's the building you were supposed to eat lunch in. I was assigned to the green building. Me and a couple guys I hung out with were eating lunch in my building's cafeteria. The 2 guys I was with were assigned to different buildings. Anyway, the assistant housemaster comes out and does his usual walkthrough of the cafeteria. His office is right off the cafeteria. He sees us and makes a beeline straight for us. I wasn't the most well-behaved kid in school. This attracts unwanted attention from time to time. But I digress. He walks up and looks right at me. "I know you belong in this building." Then to the other 2, "But you don't and you don't." He continues, "After that bell rings, I want to see this whole table in my office." When that bell rang, we picked the table up and carried it straight to his office. Next one is titled, "Flushing the Imposed Directive Away." Bit silly, but mostly happened out of annoyance. My husband is a bit pedantic. He likes things his way, and 99% of the time it confuses me as to why it's necessary to be so anal about such stupid things, but I relent and agree to his new directives. Recently he brought up toilet flushing. As a learnt behavior, I don't flush the toilet if I get up in the middle of the night so not to wake him up. He does the same for me, and if I throw in used toilet paper that I blew my nose with. However, he has stated that there are times I seem to forget to flush, and the new request is to flush every time. Honestly, this is no skin off my back and it's really not a big ask. However, this was request number 1 billion that week and I was getting slightly annoyed. QMC. What husband failed to realize is that I have had to up my water intake and go to the bathroom an obscene amount of times, 8 to 10 during the day, but I am a diligent wife and flush each and every time. Last night he was mumbling over a piece of paper. When I asked, he said our water consumption had increased quite a bit and was wondering how. In a separate thought, he had asked if I was able to sleep through the night as he was battling cause of all the noise, but his sleepy brain couldn't figure out where it was coming from. I don't like to brag or belittle people, except on Reddit, so I didn't feel that I needed to clarify either of his issues. I have decided to patiently wait as the dutiful wife he expects me to be, to let his powerful brain figure it out for himself. To be honest, my water intake has been at an all-time high the past few weeks. Really feeling great motivation to keep it up. Next one is titled, Star Child. So this my story from when I was pretty young, probably around 5 or 6. I had forgotten it until Thanksgiving when my family members reminded me of it. Figured this would be a good place to share. Growing up, I had 2 cousins who were roughly the same age as me, and we were basically brothers. Sleepovers every weekend, vacations together, holidays, etc. Our parents frequently watched each other's kids and it was usually pretty amicable arrangement. However, my uncle would frequently do little things to make sure I knew I was not his child and that I was second in the pecking order. Nothing huge, but things like making me clean up the toys after playing while his sons went inside, serving me last at meals to make sure they got what they wanted first, not getting a vote on the movies we rented, etc. One day, we were drawing pictures and my younger cousin came over and decided to draw stars all over the picture I had spent several hours on. It was a picture of a beach during a sunny day. 6-year-old me was devastated. I told him to stop and to draw on his own paper. My uncle overheard the commotion and came in. I explained what happened, and rather than giving my cousin a new piece of paper, my uncle explains that stars are still in the sky during the day, just invisible, so my cousin was really correct in fixing my picture. He gives my picture to my cousin, and tells me to go to time out in another room for yelling. I am obviously livid at this injustice, and decide to get revenge. I take a bunch of permanent markers and proceed to cover every surface of the room, walls, tables, curtains, with huge stars. Nothing is left untouched. My uncle comes in later and flips out, demanding, "What am I doing ruining everything with these stars?" I calmly replied, "I don't see any stars, they're invisible." Next one is titled, Sleep in the Car Then. A few years back I was with a guy that was a piece of work. Would usually drink too much and pass out, leaving me to remove his beer from his hand and wake him up to go to bed. After one such incident, when I'd woken him, he told me that I shouldn't wake him up again, and if he told me duck off then to just leave him, his exact words. Cue the malicious compliance. We had been out with his friends and once again he drank too much. I was driving us 90 minutes home, so didn't drink, and he once again fell asleep in the car. Getting home not long after midnight, I tried to wake him, only to receive a stream of obscenities and the basic gist of "leave me alone, I'm asleep." So I did. I left him in the car and returned to the house. I contemplated leaving the keys in the door so he couldn't get in, but didn't want to stop our roommates getting in. He came to bed around 4 hours later, freezing and complaining that I'd left him in the car, but he never grumbled at me to leave him asleep again. Last one is titled, Don't Wake Me. I'll start by saying we usually don't go to bed separately, however I got laid off and wasn't feeling too keen to go to bed yet. Last night I came to bed rather late, despite my attempts to creep across the creaky floor and slowly peel back the sheets. I woke the lady, though no wrath was sent down upon me until sunrise. Turns out I had ruined her sleep. After a discussion I promised to come to bed earlier or try harder not to wake her. This evening she's fast asleep. I quietly slip into the bedroom, under the sheets, she's none the wiser. She's still asleep on the couch after falling asleep watching the movie. I'm in bed, and she has not been woken. Thanks for listening.